Fort Campbell soldier was in federal courtrooms today. U.S. Army Sergeant Korbein Schultz is accused of selling military secrets to China. Our Michael Warwick tells us the prison time he could face.
Korbein Schultz appeared here in federal court, shackled around the ankles and in an army green t-shirt, listening intently to the judge before pleading not guilty to all counts. Inside a federal courtroom, Army Sergeant Korbein Schultz learned the penalties he could face one day after being arrested at Fort Campbell for selling military secrets to a person in Hong Kong. Schultz was allegedly paid $42,000 since 2022 in exchange for confidential maps, plans, and information about military rockets, helicopters, and missiles.
The defendant is charged with entering into a multi-year conspiracy to illegally exploit his access to national defense information for his own financial benefit.
The judge told Schultz today, if convicted, each of these 6 counts carries a maximum sentence of up to 10 to 20 years. Schultz pleaded not guilty. Aside from details about the classified information Schultz is accused of sharing with his Chinese conspirator, the indictment alleges Schultz said he wanted to be like Jason Bourne, and that he'd even discussed meeting in person with his conspirator. Well, the U.S. wants to keep Schultz in jail until his trial starts. A detention hearing about that is likely next week. Michael Warwick, WSMV4.